So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome, good morning and good afternoon. I want to talk today about our biological clocks, what they are, how they work, why they work the way they do, and critically, what we can do to work in harmony with them. I think it's safe to say that modern society and the demands of living in today's world often finds us competing with our biological clock and trying to live contrary to it versus complementary to it. So I'm going to share a screen. I've got some slides I want to share that will help give some perspective to this theme today. Bear with me. Here we go. So I want to talk about, like I said, making it our friend, because as I mentioned before, typically we don't. We live opposite to it. So I want to start by talking about time. You know, if we're going to talk about clocks, we need to have a firm understanding of what they measure, which is time. I like what St. Augustine said. He said, "If no one asks me, I know. If I wish to explain to one that asks me, I know not." It's a good point, isn't it? If I was to say to you, how would you define time? What would you say? How would you describe it? What is it? We live our lives by it, don't we? But we don't necessarily know how to describe it. Albert Einstein said that time has no independent existence apart from the order of events by which we measure it. And then time is merely the order of events, not an entity itself. That's coming from a German mathematician there. So we see then that time is essentially a measurement. It's a continuum in which events succeed one another from past through present to future. It's a measuring stick, and of course it measures the events in our lives. So in that case, that being the definition of time, let's look at how we spend it. Tony Robbins, I was at one of his events many years ago, and he said that the quality of our life is proportionate to the quality of our emotions. What does that mean? It means, as a consequence of that, that we typically pursue what we think will lead us to happiness, but we do it badly. And you can see from these statistics, 79% in 2004 of Americans consider themselves optimists. Just a few years ago, it was just 50%. That's dropped dramatically. That's a frightening thought, isn't it? Here's another sobering thought. 11% of Americans have experienced depression by the age of 18. That's a startling statistic. So this is the challenge that we face, and this is where I want to discuss our biological clock, because as a consequence of modern convenience, we see night turned into day, central heating turning winter into spring, foods coming pre-packed. All of these different things disconnect us from nature, disconnect us from the natural order of how our bodies biologically have always operated since the dawn of time. And ironically, we then see sleep as something that is to be avoided or reduced or managed so that we can fit more things into our day. The challenge is that's not what sleep is all about. In fact, I think it was Margaret Thatcher who said, who referred to it as an enemy. Sleep was an enemy to her. So let's look at the consequence here of bad sleep for just a second. We can see that sleep disorders, this is frightening. $40 billion a year is lost in productivity due to accidents and medication to support, due to lack of sleep or poor sleep. It's interesting that Chernobyl, as an example, has also been cited as being the consequence of sleep-deprived shift workers. British Airways, pulling in some English statistics here, warned that decision-making can be downgraded by 50%, communication skills by 30%, memory by 20%, and attention by 75% as a result of compromised sleep. And this is frightening, isn't it? The risk of a car accident is 20 times higher at 6 a.m. in the morning compared to 10 p.m. at night. So what this tells us, I'll pause this for just a second. What this tells us is a really sobering truth, a really important point, that we're trying to live in a world that minimizes sleep, that removes its necessity. But what we also see is it's building up billions and billions of dollars of problems a year that is creating through shift workers, through broken, compromised thinking, awareness, judgment, all of these types of things. The consequence of broken sleep is frightening. It's the one thing that we do more than anything else in the world, ever in our lives, collectively, is sleep. 1/3 of our life is spent sound asleep. And for most people, we give little thought to that. And yet it is something that we actually need to give serious consideration to, as these statistics, of course, are showing us. So let me jump back to this slide again, and we can pick up. So here are some costs. And it's interesting when you ask people how much they value their sleep, look at the cost that it has on the workplace. The risk of injury, 20% higher in the night shift. Work-related accidents due to poor sleep cost the UK $114 million a year. Now, the interesting thing is, like I say here, by definition, consequences happen in the future. So that means if we change what we think now, we can therefore change what our future in terms of health and happiness. I hope everyone is in agreement to that. If this is the consequence of bad sleep, of fighting nature and how our bodies have always worked for generations and millennia, then maybe if we were to think a little differently now, we could change our future in regards to our health and well-being. And I like this point. I love that photograph. But this is the critical point when it comes to biology, that life is not about time, it's about timing. You know, I like this scripture that's referenced. I hope you don't mind me using something from the Old Testament here. There is a time to be born and a time to die, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to get and a time to lose, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. Timing literally is of the essence, isn't it? Perfect timing, comic timing, dramatic timing, all of these things. It's about timing versus time. So I want to ask you some questions then in the relation to timing as we look at nature. And these are fun questions to ask because when you consider it, it's incredible, isn't it? It's miraculous what we witness every day, and yet we take it for granted so often. How do bison know when to migrate? How do salmon know when to spawn? How do birds know to fly south for the winter? And why is it that every year lambs are always born in the springtime? How do they know to do that? Why is it that instinctively we as human beings want to sleep at night versus fall asleep during the daytime? Why is it? This is interesting. The risk of heart attacks is 30 to 40% higher between 6 a.m. and midday. That's interesting, isn't it? While we're awake. Why do most women go into labor during the nighttime? Why is this? There are reasons to this. These aren't just curious questions. They actually have scientific answers. And the answer, let me ask a few more questions first. Why is asthma? Anyone that suffers with asthma will find that they find it worse at nighttime. Why does rheumatoid arthritis give us morning stiffness, but osteoarthritis is worse in the afternoon or evening? And I love this one. This one's very true. Why do we eat in intervals during the day, but not at night? That's a fascinating thought, isn't it? How is it that that works? Of course, if the bodily functions of the day were also applied to the nighttime, we'd have terribly broken sleep. So it seems that the body is aware of that and actually takes deliberate steps to look after our sleep. So what we see then, as a consequence of that, is our biological clock is actually working to enhance life. It's more interested, like I said, in timing than it is about time, because it wants to make sure that things work together in order. It doesn't want there to be chaos in our bodies. It regulates time. It makes sure that things are done in sequence and in order to look after us and enrich our lives. So if we listen to it, our biological clock can, of course, ease the tension between the way we want to live and the way we are built to live. And this, of course, creates balance. And I'm grateful for that, because here in NECAM, that's everything we talk about, isn't it? We talk about having a life in balance, how to get that through those 5 pillars of health, but fundamental to those 5 pillars, a healthy mind, a healthy body, healthy family, healthy society, healthy finances. Fundamental to that is, of course, the healthy the pillar of a healthy body. But it's fascinating to me just how much our body deliberately drives the best solutions for us. Don't you find that exciting? The way that it looks after us, all of those examples of when to eat, when to sleep, when to go to the bathroom, how our heart rests, how our brain reinvigorates and compartmentalizes and stores information, how our different organs work at different times of the day for maximum effect. All of this is done to regulate what we call the circadian rhythm of our lives. And every living thing that I'm aware of operates with a circadian rhythm. Circadian meaning circa, Latin for about, and diem being a day. It's about a day. This rhythm of living from night to day in the sequence and order for a reason. This rhythm exists for purpose, not just for us, but for every living thing. They operate that way. And so let me jump back now to the screen again. So it's important to respect that this has been going on for thousands of years. Thousands of years. As long as the human species has been around, this biological clock has been in operation. So we've talked about time. We've talked about the need for timing and the essential role of timing within our body. So we've talked about that. So what is the clock? And it says here, a clock is a device that undergoes and counts regular cycles of motion. The more regular the cycles, the more accurate the clock. So the clock is something that regulates or is measuring the cycles within our body. So that's what the circadian rhythm and our biological clocks do. They help to establish a rhythm and a cycle, and it helps to measure it and keep it on track. Everything works this way. It works, I like this, on a feed forward versus a feedback approach. Timing is about anticipation, and it anticipates daily changes and adapts our bodies for maximum effect. Let me say that again, because if we want a healthy, well-balanced life, this timing and the respect of these cycles becomes very, very important to us. It's about anticipating the daily changes in our body and in the day and adapting our bodies for maximum effect. Feed forward versus feedback. And like I said, what I love about the biological clock is it stops everything from happening at once. Sleep-wake cycles, for example, kidney function and other organs, our moods and emotions, they actually change and vary according to different times of the day as well. Blood pressure, cognitive abilities, all of these have their time and place at different times of the day. And of course, disruption to it. I want to touch on this for just a second. There we go, just switch off that extra noise there. Disruption to the clock is also critically important as well. What happens if we ignore the clock? Broken sleep leads to depression. It leads to sleep disorders, of course. Oops. It leads to sleep disorders. It actually impacts our weight. Now, that's an interesting one. You know, a lot of people don't realize that broken sleep actually encourages weight gain. What happens is when our sleep is broken, is our body then starts to crave carbohydrates. It starts to crave the types of foods that will increase our weight. But if we are well hydrated and we have a good night's sleep consistently, that can actually aid weight loss. Now, there aren't too many companies out there that are promoting weight loss that actually talk about sleep. That's unusual, when yet that is something that is so critical for our bodies to appreciate. So we see that it impacts so many different things. Like I said, obesity, mental health disorders. There are so many mental health disorders that identify that if that sleep-wake pattern is broken or compromised, then it increases the risk of mental health episodes, which is not good. Cardiac arrest, of course, can definitely come as a result of lost sleep. Poor social skills. We saw the statistics there before, didn't we, that I referenced earlier. But it can actually make you pretty rubbish in a social setting if you're sleep deprived. How many of us get irritable and annoying, difficult, obstinate when we are sleep deprived, grumpy, and so on? Our choices, our decision making compromised significantly. And of course, we've seen the impact on accidents and fatigue and so on. The consequences of disrupting the clock are both expensive personally to us and also to the workplace. So what is the solution? The solution, I think, is really nice. We want to sleep well in a dark room, on a good bed. That's really important. So many of us, unfortunately, compromise our sleeping environment. Our bedrooms are often lit from the light of a television screen. We often have our mobile phones, our cell phones, on our bedside cabinets, ready to be picked up or put down during the night. Or maybe we have a look at it before we go to sleep, and we jolt our eyes with that wrong technology and kind of stimulate our brains and actually put them in a state where they want to stay awake versus go to sleep. But we should sleep in a darkened room with comfortable bedding, with a warm blanket, and make sure that we are well established in that environment for a deep, restorative, rejuvenating sleep. That's really important. Be well hydrated as well. Get plenty of fresh air, and of course, drink plenty of good, fresh, clean water. These simple things do wonders to regulate and respect our biological clocks. It's remarkable how much pain and suffering so many people endure and experience in today's way of living in society nowadays, that can be overcome with a good night's sleep, with a glass of fresh, clean water, and some fresh air and a bit of nice sunshine. That can do remarkable wonders for our health and well-being. So my invitation to you today, this call is going to be just 20 minutes long today. My invitation to each of us today is to listen to our biological clock and respect it. Try to live in tandem with it, in harmony with it. Treat it as your best friend, because the reality is it is regulating, monitoring, and timing everything in your body to give you the best experience of life it can. It is your greatest ally. And societal living today can sometimes be our worst enemy. Let's try to find the balance, get a good night's sleep, make sure you've got the tools to do that. Make sure you're well hydrated, and make sure you get plenty of fresh, clean air and plenty of sunlight. Doing this will ensure you have a much better approach to an active living, standard of living. So thank you all very much. I hope you find this helpful. Please, of course, share it with those that you love and care for. This information, I think, is easy to be taken for granted, but it's so, so important. Simple solutions for very big problems. So thank you all very much, and I look forward to speaking to you real soon. Bye-bye.